The day we moved in, I remember thinking, this is it. This is where life finally gets quiet. The moving truck had barely turned the corner, and I was already out on the porch, sipping a cold beer while my wife, Maggie, unpacked the last kitchen box. We'd picked this cul-de-sac in Ridgewood Pines because it looked like a postcard. Trimmed hedges, identical mailboxes, neighbors who wave just enough but not too much. After years of chaos in both our lives, it felt like a fresh start. At least, that's what we thought. Now, I'm a logistics analyst. My whole life runs on structure and predictability. Maggie, on the other hand, came from a background that couldn't be more different. She'd served in a unit that officially doesn't exist, a ghost team, the kind of folks the government pretends they've never met. She didn't talk about it much, said she was done with that world. This house was supposed to be her sanctuary. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. Maybe an hour after the movers left, I noticed someone standing across the street. Woman in her late 50s, maybe early 60s, with a haircut sharp enough to slice fruit and a stare like she was inspecting a crime scene. No wave, no smile, just surveillance. Maggie came out and wrapped her arms around my waist, noticed her too. Didn't say anything, but I felt her posture change just a little. Tension, like she knew something I didn't. That was our first encounter with Carol Hawthorne, president of the Ridgewood Pines Homeowners Association. And from that moment on, we knew peace wouldn't come easy. Carol didn't knock on our door the next day. She rapped, like a cop with a warrant. She brought her husband, Ted, who looked like a mix between a nervous accountant and a smug hyena. She didn't say hello, just shoved a binder at my chest and said, "This is the HOA covenant. Non-compliance results in fines. It's all in there." I said, "Thanks, we're Jack and Maggie." She didn't even blink. Her eyes darted to Maggie like she was analyzing a threat assessment. I should have known then. This wasn't about lawn regulations. It was about control. First fine came 2 days later. $25 for leaving our garden hose in public view. It was neatly coiled on a hanger. Apparently, that wasn't up to code. That was just the start. We got fined for our grass being a 1/4 inch too tall, for a FedEx truck idling too long, for having unapproved paint trim on a window, same white as the house next door. Carol was measuring things with rulers, literal rulers. Her husband, Ted, followed Maggie around with his phone like he was filming a nature documentary on dangerous suburban wildlife. Then came the cops. It was a Thursday night. We were in the kitchen, unpacking spices, jazz playing low in the background. Suddenly, red and blue lights swept through the window like we'd set off an alarm. I opened the door, heart pounding. 2 officers stood there, one older, one young, hand near his holster. "We had a call," the older one said, "something about a disturbance, a suspicious individual matching the description of a potential threat." I laughed. I actually laughed. "You mean my wife?" Maggie stepped up beside me and calmly said, "What exactly was the description?" The cops fumbled. Vague. Woman acting agitated, possibly dangerous. Carol had seen her through the window and decided to weaponize her past. That's when Maggie did something I'll never forget. She rolled up her sleeve. There on her forearm was the tattoo, a design you don't forget once you've seen it. Skull, wings, serpents coiled around a series of numbers. If you know, you know. The young officer's eyes widened. The older one straightened, cleared his throat, and just like that, everything shifted. "Ma'am," he said, "I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding. Apologies for disturbing you." They left. And from the window across the street, we saw Carol pull back her curtain like she'd just seen a ghost. And in a way, she had. That night, Maggie told me something that chilled me to the bone. She said, "She didn't call the cops because I was new. She called them because she recognized something." Turns out, she was right. The days that followed were worse. Fines stacked up. Our garbage bins were dragged into the driveway. Someone spray-painted "No secrets here" on our fence. My work got an anonymous email saying I was unstable, having domestic issues. HR called me in for a wellness check. My career, built on being dependable, was suddenly on the edge of collapse, all because some bitter woman across the street saw a tattoo and panicked. But then, Chloe stepped in. She lived 2 doors down, quiet, maybe late 20s, always walked her tiny dog like she hoped no one noticed her. One evening she came up to me, voice barely a whisper. "You're Jack, right? I saw Carol calling the cops. She looked happy doing it, like she was hunting. She's been doing this to people for years. If someone pushes back, their lives get ruined. She's got this fund. No one knows where the fine money goes. My husband calls it her slush fund. I shouldn't be telling you this." But she did, and that changed everything. Maggie made a phone call that night to someone she hadn't spoken to in over a decade. A retired federal judge named Walter Keegan used to work with her old CO. We met him in a downtown office that smelled like books and bourbon. Maggie told him everything: the fines, the surveillance, the tattoo, the fear. Walter leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "You think she recognized your unit?" Maggie nodded. "She didn't just see ink, she saw a ghost." Walter nodded slowly. "Then she might not be who she says she is." Turns out, she wasn't. A week later, Walter found her real name. Carol Hawthorne was born Irina Kovacs, a fixer in an arms trafficking ring operating in Eastern Europe in the early 2000s. She'd been picked up, flipped, and disappeared into the U.S. under witness protection. New name, new life. But Maggie's unit? They were the ones who took down the organization Irina betrayed. So when Carol, Irina, saw Maggie's tattoo, she wasn't just afraid of a neighbor. She was terrified her past had caught up with her. And the icing on the cake? While Walter dug into her past, I dug into her present. Thanks to Chloe, I got my hands on an email thread between Carol and a guy named Brandon Fields, a VP at a development firm. Turns out Carol was working on a secret deal to sell the entire cul-de-sac to a developer, 10 homes, 1 complex. She'd get a $2 million payout if all the properties were acquired. Our house, right on the curve, was the keystone, and we weren't playing along. So she escalated. That's when we set the trap. I installed cameras, real ones, discreet, motion-activated, with audio pickup. We sent a legal letter disputing all the fines, just to poke the bear. 2 nights later, it worked. At 2:17 a.m., Ted crept across our yard with a can of spray paint, wrote one word on the fence: leave. But better yet, we had audio of him whispering to Carol afterward. "Did you do it?" "Yeah." "Good," she hissed. "Once they're gone, the developer deal is sealed. Brandon's getting impatient. This is their last warning." We had her. So, when Carol called an emergency HOA meeting to vote us out for dangerous and repeated violations, we showed up, calm, collected, and with a USB drive. She made her speech first, painted us as unstable, dangerous, a threat to the community. Then she asked, real smug, "Does the homeowner have anything to say?" I stood up. "Yeah, Carol, we've got a few things to share." The first slide, her emails with Brandon. The second, bank statements showing fines going to a private account. Third, security footage of Ted defacing our property. And then, the audio. Once the psycho soldier and her weakling husband are gone, the deal is sealed. Brandon's getting impatient. This is their last warning. You could hear a pin drop. Carol screamed it was fake, forged, hysterical. Then she made the worst mistake of her life. She lunged, not at me, but at the laptop. And when she couldn't reach it, she turned to Maggie and screamed, "You! I should have let them finish you in Belgrade. You and your whole damn unit." And that was that. 2 plainclothes men stood up at the back of the room, U.S. Marshals. They stepped forward just as the local police chief walked in. Irina Kovacs, also known as Carol Hawthorne, once said, "Badge held high, you're under arrest for violating the terms of federal witness protection." The chief added, "You and your husband are also being charged with fraud, vandalism, and criminal conspiracy." Carol went limp. Ted sobbed. And just like that, the Queen of Ridgewood Pines was dethroned. Her arrest triggered a federal probe that swept up Brandon, a few city officials, and half a dozen shell companies tied to the development scam. The HOA was dissolved unanimously. Chloe took over organizing neighborhood events. The rulebook was burned in a barbecue pit, no less. Maggie? She started teaching free self-defense classes in the old clubhouse, Saturday mornings. Said it was her way of giving women in the neighborhood the tools to protect themselves, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. Me? I learned that being a calm, spreadsheet